following is a presentation of Epic eSports Radio Network. Live from Oregon, broadcasting around the world, you're listening to the Coach's Corner Radio Show. Sit back as we provide in-depth analysis covering all your favorite sports. Football, baseball, soccer. There's not a sport that we don't cover. So step up to the plate. Get ready for a hit. We're putting on a show, and Coach Craven's hosting it. So without further ado, we proudly present to you your host, Coach Brian Craven.
Hey, welcome back to Coach's Corner, brought to you by Epic eSports. If you are watching on YouTube, I encourage you to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that notification bell. We are trying to get the word out about all of our great esports, and that's one way to do it. Sometimes it's hard to spread the word. Sometimes in the different Discord channels, they've got limitations on how many times you can ping everyone, and we just want to get the word out. We got some great people, some great stuff, and we're here to bring it to you. I have a fantastic series of interviews for you coming up. We're going to be dropping these probably not all at once. I have 4 parts of an interview with Ross Napoli and Slinn Shady. We've got a top list, top 5, top 10, depending on the subject. We talk a little bit about the playoffs up to that point. One thing I should add, I did the interview a little while ago. Life got in the way. I wasn't able to get the intros and the other things done. We're a little behind, and so you get the pleasure of hearing whether or not our predictions were right or wrong, and probably letting us know where they were wrong. I can take it. I got broad shoulders. Anyway, strap in. I doubt any of you are going to listen to all 4 of these all at once. Like I said, they're going to be individual episodes, and I think it's good. It was a lot of fun. Little bit of sound issues, mostly on my end, but the other guys came through okay, and I think it's going to be good. We are about to have possibly the longest episode ever from Coach's Corner. I'm kidding. Don't freak out, Cam. But I have 2 esteemed guests. You've heard them before. I've got Slinn Shady and Ross Napoli together, and we've got some lists we put together. We may fire a few people up, and I'm all right with that. Remember, it's just our opinion. It's just an opinion. It's okay. How you guys doing?
I'm doing good.
Doing good? Slinn, you doing good?
I'm doing great. I was going to say after you, Ross, and be polite, but he just jumped in there, so no choice.
It's kind of late over there, isn't it? So, you know.
It's the moon is up, well, behind the rainy clouds, but no, it's not too bad. I can handle it.
Well, I want to give Slinn credit. He is the one that came up with this show idea, and I think it's fantastic. We're going to have a lot of fun with it. We have a top 5 or possibly 10. I think a couple of our topics we have 10. We have a top 5 show, and we've got some ideas that maybe you all haven't thought about, or maybe you have, but you've been afraid to voice them. So without any further messing around, we're going to jump right in. First thing we have is top 5 offenses. And we didn't talk about this. I assumed you guys weren't just talking straight yardage, because to me that doesn't tell the whole story. So who wants to jump in first? Slinn, you got some offenses for us you want to talk about?
I do. To me, actually, what's the main job of the offense is to score points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at a lot of teams, their offense is their best defense as well.
Yes.
Because it keeps them ahead of the other team. It keeps them ahead of the downs. So I've kind of gone off that as a base, off points per game, and then gone from there. And I've kind of got as well like offenses that I like to watch as well.
Sure. Okay.
Because, for instance, not on my list is Vancouver. they aren't on my list. And to me, that's because they have like half huge games, half games where they're just not there altogether at all. So there's no consistency. I mean, yes, they made the playoffs, but I think the lack of consistency compared to the top 5 I've got, I don't know. It just didn't. They just didn't make the top 5, which might surprise some people. Sorry, Vancouver. I think on their day they are the best. But anyway, so I think my number 5 team is going to be. Oh, it was hard. I'm going to go with Sioux Falls.
Okay.
Sioux Falls were at number 5 on my list. I think they are one-dimensional, but it's a hell of a dimension to have. Like, if you can win games you can win 9 games just by pounding the ball with Colin Hart and getting great blocking. I mean, you can't really say fairer than that. And I think as well, I think Julian Tyree, he doesn't get many yards, but when they're in the red zone, he does score touchdowns.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
They've scored there. I mean, they scored 14 passing touchdowns, which isn't that great in comparison to some of the more passing teams, but it's still enough when you consider they've scored 20 rushing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think Sioux Falls deserve a spot in my top 5. Did you want me to go through the whole list first, or do you want Ross to jump in with his? Or
yeah, why don't we have your whole list, and then we'll have Ross, and then I will.
Okay. So next on my list is Houston.
Okay.
I think Houston's offense, especially towards the end of the season, is basically the reason why they've squeaked into the playoffs. They have the worst defense in the league according to points per game.
Mm.
So the fact that they're in the playoffs, their offense must be doing something. And obviously, they've got like Kentez has his on and off games, but Warren Murray is just an absolute beast.
Oh yeah.
If he doesn't make the All-Star game, then there's something wrong with the world. And I mean, it's just I really like watching Warren Murray play, and I've liked watching him since season 10 when he first entered the league. And then Leroy Brown is an underrated receiver. I think he's had a really good season. Obviously, you've got DR Sim in there as well, and I think Houston's had maybe not the most consistent year, but it's been consistent enough for me to put them in the top 5. Then the picture of consistency, Baltimore. I feel like they're the most zen, balanced offense you could possibly find. They can run the ball with T-Roy Gaines. They can pass the ball 1,000 times to Ivory Irving. They're good in the red zone. They're good on third down. They're just all round a good offense. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the best in any one category, but they're just a good offense. And then my top 2 are Denver and Louisiana. The old rivalry that seems to have sprung up this season. Obviously, Louisiana have got Reggie Streeter, but then, as we've seen, Johnny can turn it on when he has to. And then Denver have just been unstoppable. They just seem that I feel like Denver are a clutch offense. Denver are an offense where when you need them to sort of pull it out the bag, much like they did away at Portland early in the season, they just can. Maybe if you need a big third quarter to pull away from a team that you should be beating, but they're still there at halftime, Denver's offense just manages to do it. And so that's why I'd say those 2 are my top. I can't decide between the 2 of them, so those 2 are my top 2.
Okay. Yeah. Ross, you have the floor.
All right. Well, mine's a little different than Slynn's, and I guess it's basically because we used a couple of different factors. I basically did mine based on passing offense and run offense together, yardage, being able to move the ball, as well as how many touchdowns total, an offense is scoring. It was tough for me at number 5, balancing a couple of things that I was looking at. but I'm going to bring Jacksonville in at 5. I think that averaging 264 passing yards a game and 117 rushing yards a game kind of gave them a real balanced attack offensively wise. Scored 33 total touchdowns, not necessarily putting them in the top 5 in that category, but the balance and being able to score when they needed to and being a top team for most of the season, being in the top 5. I brought them in at my number 5 offense this season.
Okay.
I have Baltimore at number 4. I think that what held me back with Baltimore is averaging less than 100 yards rushing a game. That kind of really, if we're talking about top offenses, especially in our league, I want teams that are going to be able to run the ball, and, not that they weren't good in certain games with the run, but that's what held them out of my top 3, Baltimore. Against, like what Slinn said, I have Vancouver at 3. 42 total touchdowns. I mean, they scored a lot of touchdowns, but I'm going to give credit to being one of the handful of teams that were averaging over 300 passing yards a game. So I'm gonna put them in there at 3, with also averaging 132 rushing yards a game. So their averages were high. When you look at them in total yards, they're not they weren't totally better than some of these other teams. But again, for me, consistency in both the passing and the running is what's key for me. And then, like Slinn, I have Louisiana and Denver at 1 and 2. Of course, no shock, I'm going to have Louisiana 1, but I'm going to tell you why. And it really was tough because Denver clearly averages more passing yards than Louisiana a game. But Reggie Streeter, obviously, we have the number 1 rushing attack in the league, averaging 186 yards a game. So I think that was real important for us. We scored 1 more touchdown than Denver this year. We had 46 total touchdowns when they had 45. And that's what's going to make me put Louisiana above Denver, because there was only 1 touchdown total difference in the offense. But I think through difficulty of schedule and strength of schedule, Louisiana played a tougher schedule. So to still have scored more touchdowns than Denver with a tougher schedule and playing more teams and beating more teams that are in the playoff race, I'm gonna give the Revolution offense a slight edge, because I'm not saying it was a clear-cut thing, but I have Denver at 2 and Louisiana.
Okay, sure. Well, and hey, I'm not trying to make you claim to be unbiased at all. So if you hadn't picked Louisiana, I would have been very shocked. So my list is actually pretty similar, which is not a big surprise. One of the things, though, for me was, if I'm looking at a team and I'm trying to defend them, how hard is that going to be? What am I concerned about? And so you have, when you look at like total yards, for example, I think Carolina is up there. They're like 3rd or something, but they're going to throw. They're going to throw. You knew they were going to throw a lot, and so the offense was one-dimensional. Interestingly enough, everybody knows how much I love Sioux Falls. I love Sioux Falls. I love what they do. I don't actually have their offense on my list. I know when we were preparing for them, we just said, listen, we know they can throw the ball if they need to, but it's about the running game. And, well, we didn't even stop the running game as much as we wanted to. I have Baltimore just outside of my list, and that is simply because they were under 100 yards rushing. The fact of the matter is, if they wanted to be rushing more, they could. So it's not really fair of me to hold it against them, because that is a fantastically balanced offense. I think they were like at 98.9 or something like that. They were almost 100 yards. Right. But everybody else had more balance. So at number 5, I've got Houston. Houston was a pain to prepare for offensively. I think everything that you guys have said about Houston makes sense. And, that's why they're number 5. Jacksonville I have on there. Again, same reason. Balance. Last year they were, they were all about chucking and ducking, and they threw the crap out of that thing. This year they had some balance. And the record's about the same, but it makes them harder to deal with. And I have Vancouver at 3 as well. Yes, they're inconsistent. Yes, turnovers are an issue. But the fact of the matter is, when you're getting ready for them, you're like, God, I hope this is the Vancouver. I hope this is not the Vancouver we saw against Houston. I hope this is Vancouver that turns the ball over. Because if they don't, they're terrifying. And then I have Louisiana and Denver. Again, it's some of the same things. They're almost a pick 'em at that point. Denver and Jeremy gets salty when we talk about his strength of schedule and all that stuff. It is what it is. It is what it is. He can only beat the teams in front of him. He has done that. He deserves that number 1 rating. But when I'm sitting here looking at things, and I thought Slinn made a great point, that they seem so clutch. Like when they need a good run from McChesney, they get it. When they need that clutch third down, maybe to Bryce Battle or whatever, or Joshua, they get it. You saw that big throw against Charleston, just out of nowhere. They go down the sideline to Giacomo Jones, I think it was, and game over. They've been a very balanced offense, very hard to deal with. And like you said, Louisiana, when they, of course you're going to feed Registry to the ball. But they don't have to, because Johnny showed he can turn it on. So, I didn't expect to see a lot of differences on that list, and our lists are pretty close. You guys have any final thoughts on that part? Slinn, you want to go first on that? Any rebuttals? Any rebuttals to Ross and I?
No, I think it's Ross clearly did more statistical analysis than I did, which is fine. I do like a good statistic, but I think part of what's interesting is how the three of us, even though we got similar conclusions, we came to it via different ways. So I kind of relied on the eye test and what I'd seen this season, and as well as a little bit of statistics. And Ross was quite detailed with his, and then Coach, you can come at it from a different perspective because you actually have to coach against these teams. Especially the defenses as well, which I think our defenses may be more varied than the offenses were.
Right. Yeah, well, and the interesting thing about offense and defense is you talk about complementary football. I know for us, for example, I wanted to hold on to the football as much as possible to keep the defense from having to play all the time. I wanted to, I just wanted to, just more bites at the apple. And so you watch some of these teams, and interestingly enough, when you look at the statistics, they sort of bear that out. But complementary football is part of the deal. Ross, why don't you start us on the defensive list, if you would?
Okay. My 5, I was torn between my number 5 pick, I should say. I was torn between 2 because what I went here again is looking more numbers. I broke mine down based on points given up, and averages per games were important to me. And I went with turnovers, combined with touchdowns allowed. Because if we're going to sit here and talk about offenses and how I was looking at it, saying that I'm looking for teams to be balanced, put up a decent amount of passing yards as well as rushing yards, talking about touchdowns, I wanted to kind of judge defense the same way, because I'm not going to give an offense credit for averaging great yardage on both sides of the ball and scoring a decent amount of touchdowns and then not have that be my basic, barometer for defense.
Sure.
So I think it was tough to kind of narrow down out of a list of about 5 or 6 teams just to get to 4 and 5. I was pretty confident with my 1, 2, and 3. But out of the other ones, with 5, I'm going to go with Charleston.
Okay.
And for me, it was between Charleston and Vancouver at 5, based on if there are even amount of points given up, which Vancouver and Charleston both were averaging, giving up 21 points a game. Charleston gave up 26 touchdowns as opposed to Vancouver's 28. The difference for me that gives it to Charleston is that Charleston was +7 in the turnover differential, where Vancouver was -4. So for the difference there, I gave Charleston number 5. I mean, they had some close games this year. Charleston kept themselves in it, and I felt that they were the 5th best defense in the league. I put Florida at 4. I think they were another team that kind of defensively, they played a lot better at the end of the season. Another team averaging 21 points per game against. They gave up 29 touchdowns, which, a lot of my top teams here did give up around that or a little bit more. But they were -2 in the turnover differential. But I couldn't put Charleston above Florida because I just felt that, as like Slinn said, when you watched Florida and you gave it the eye test, I just think that Florida was a better defensive team. So once the numbers brought them within a similar category, I wanted to make sure that when I looked at it, it was, well, hey, I mean, who looked like a better defense on the field between the two? And I thought that was Florida.
Sure.
My number 3 team, I got Baltimore. +13 in the point differential. They were second in the league in turnover differential. They gave up 29 touchdowns, just like Florida, and they only gave up 22 points a game. One more than Florida. But that +13, I think, really catapults them over a lot of teams. They were tough. They played the better teams tough this year, and I had no doubt in my mind that Baltimore was the 3rd best team. Number 2, I have Louisiana, based on leading the league in turnover differential at +18. So we gave up 24 points a game, which is more than anybody else on my list here. But the turnover differential was just too much to overcome to say that, we gave up 38 touchdowns this year. So we gave up a lot. But that +18, like I said, was enough for me to move Louisiana's defense to the number 2 spot, because I can't not make it a top 5 defense when you lead the league in turnover differential and it's at +18. And I believe that either ties, I believe it's tied an SFL record for highest turnover differential in the year. I don't believe it set the record, but I believe it ties it. So I'm not going to not put the Revolution defense not in the top 5 based on that fact. I made Denver's defense number 1. For me, only giving up 19 points a game, regardless of your strength of schedule, we know how the AI works, and it's tough to keep people in this game to minimal points per game. We all know that. We've all watched games. We've all been part of this, and it's very rare to see teams not really score a lot of points. So to lead the league with 19 points against was enough for me to say that should be the number 1 defense in the league, with how high-powered some of these offenses actually were. And, they were +8 in the turnover differential. They were top 5 in turnover differential, but the 19 points a game really, really solidified for me the number 1 spot for defense.
Sure. Okay. Slinn, wake up. If you're not.
I'm awake. Don't worry. I'm awake.
I know. You're a consummate professional. I knew you were.
I know. I have not just been searching through the schedule looking for the upsets that we're going to go through over next. So I have got Denver on my list, but I've got them at number 5.
Okay.
I think it's hard with defensive statistics because you kind of have to add the caveat that okay, so for instance, Denver has by far the best rushing defense on paper, but then you have to imagine that not many teams would be rushing against them because they'll be playing from behind. So that's probably a large factor in that. And when you look at the passing statistics, they're in the bottom 5 because teams will be passing against them constantly. But like Ross says, they've got, the lowest points per game, which is tough to do consistently throughout the season. Whether you're winning most of your games or not, it wasn't just the offense that came to play for Denver; it was the defense as well. So I think I'm going to give them in the top 5, but not number 1 because I think they did have a lot of that. They did have a lot of help from the offense, and I think there's defenses in my top 5 that had a lot less help from their offense, and yet still were able to pull out games tough. Which is the next team, St. Louis. The St. Louis Gladiators. I remember when they were the first team to come into Vegas this season and beat us. There's been a lot of talk this season about Vegas's home advantage. Dave likes to think that we've got the biggest home advantage out of anyone. I'm not sure how that works, considering it's a simulation, but I'm happy to go with it because we were great at home compared to on the road. But St. Louis, their defense was so strong and so tricky and frustrating to play against. And I mean, I think they had 2 games in a row where they won 20-3. One of them was on the road as well. So, considering how young the offense was, St. Louis did they get 5 wins in the end? Was it 5 and 7?
Yes.
Considering how young the offense was, especially at the start of the season, that defense really kept them in games and allowed them to win games. So I feel like I've got to give props there and put them in my top 5 for that sole reason. And then next I've got Vancouver. Statistically, they're just good across the board, very balanced. I think underrated. I didn't think of Vancouver as a particularly great defensive team. And I feel like last season they weren't that good defensively. It was all about the offense. I mean, you can correct me on that, Coach, but I feel like statistically last season they weren't as good defensively.
No, we weren't.
So they kind of slipped under the radar a bit. But looking at the statistics, you can't deny that they've had a great season. And then, like Ross, I've got Florida in my top 5. I think Florida's defense is, a huge part of the reason why they had the mid-season run to catapult them into the playoffs after such a bad start. I think, the sort of 0-3 start they had was because the defense wasn't quite firing. And then as soon as it started to become a cohesive unit and start playing much better, then that really catapulted them and kicked off that run. And then my top defense, it's a defense I've admired all season, just from what they've kind of consistently done to certain teams. They've managed to get a shutout. I think they've got at least 1 shutout. I don't think they've got more than 1. But yeah, I'm going to go with Fort Worth. Fort Worth's defense has been, I think it's been great all season. And I think it's a big reason why they got such marquee wins over big teams, because their defense kept them in games at crucial moments. You talk about clutch for Denver's offense. I feel like Fort Worth's defense was clutch, and it kind of stands to reason that two of the teams that played on my top 5, St. Louis and Fort Worth, they ended in a 14-0 victory to Fort Worth, as far as I know, which is probably, it's got to be one, if not the lowest score of the season, one of the lowest scoring games of the season. So they will be my top 1. I also need to give credit as a sort of honourable mention to, first of all the teams that got really high turnovers. So Louisiana, Charleston, Las Vegas, because that's a huge part of it. And Houston, even though Houston had the most points against, they did get a lot of turnovers, which probably helped the offense become as good as it did. And then also pre-incident Chicago. Chicago's defense before the Shan Varner incident was up there. It was the best defense in the league. statistically. And it's only since the offense has struggled mightily that the defense has sort of almost ran out of steam as the season's gone along. So I've got to give props and credit where credit's due. Chicago's pre-incident defense was up there with the best.
Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? It was doing really well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my list real quick. It's very similar to you guys, and some of the points are very quick, but I've got a couple of thoughts on some of the things we've said. Again, I had Baltimore just outside of the top 5. Statistically, they're pretty good, but just outside the top 5. I had at number 5, I had Sioux Falls, I had Charleston, I had Vancouver, I had Florida, and then I had Denver. But a couple of things popped into my mind. One for Denver, and Denver played Portland twice. And Portland was, even when Portland was giving them a battle early on, they didn't score a lot of points. Portland was one of the worst defenses, or offenses. I'm sorry, it was the worst offense in the league. That certainly helped their defensive rating. They also, in terms of their rushing, they played, Slinn, Vegas twice. And you guys had one big rushing game, and the rest of the time you were mostly about throwing the ball. And that, to me, that doesn't take anything away from what they've done. It merely provides context for what they did. And while I do have them at number 1, it sort of comes with an asterisk a little bit because of, and again, you have to play who's on the schedule. You don't have a choice. That's what you got to do. And they did that. They beat all but one team, and, well deserved. But it does, like I say, it comes with a little bit of an asterisk. The thing I would love to see, and I didn't even consider St. Louis. And it's just because I was just looking at raw numbers. The thing I would love to see is the time of possession for these teams. How much of the game these defenses are on the field? Yeah, because that really, back to that complementary football idea. That time of possession piece is huge for the defense. It can make a defense look better than they are. It can make a defense look worse than they are. When you look at the common teams up here, Sioux Falls had a pretty good defense, and they've got some great players over there. But how much of that was because they had an offense that would run the ball like crazy and hold on to it? Louisiana had a lot of turnovers, which was fantastic. Turnover differential is such a big deal. But they did give up, as Ross pointed out, more points. Well, how much of that is because Regis Streeter was going yard every time he touched the ball, and the defense was right back on the field? It's hard to say. All of that comes together in this little piece. And it makes me wonder, I would love to see that stat. I don't think we tracked that stat over the course of the season, but I would sure love to see it. That was part 1 of my interview with Slinn Shady and Ross Napoli. I hope you enjoyed that. We will be back for part 2 soon, and we're going to have top 5 upsets, I believe, is on that episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about the playoffs. As I mentioned in the intro, that is actually going to be outdated. This was recorded a little while ago, and we've actually gone 2 rounds in the playoff, I believe, since that was recorded. Still a good show, a lot of fun, and like I said in the intro, you can roast us for where we were wrong. So, that's always fun, right? Anyway, that's it for this show, and we'll be back soon. Good luck, and God bless, my friends.
You've been listening to the Coach's Corner podcast with Coach Brian Craven, an Epic eSports Radio Network exclusive. If you enjoyed today's show, tell a friend. Make sure never to miss an episode by subscribing to Epic eSports on YouTube or downloading on Spotify. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to enable all notifications so you never miss our newest content. Thank you for listening.